Hello, Keith McLean speaking.
Hi, Keith. This is Anna Watson.
Hello there, Anna.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. And how are you?
Good. Yes, good. Thank you. Is now still a good time for a chat?
It is, yes.
Oh, brilliant. Well, yes, thank you so much for taking my call. So as I mentioned, I'm a PhD candidate at the Science Policy Research Unit and at the UK Energy Research Centre as well. So I'm supervised by Jim. And my research is looking to analyse the impact of political economy on the direction of clean electricity innovation. And I'm generally looking from around 2003, when climate change really came on the agenda as a mainstream narrative until now. So yeah, it's great to be speaking with you in that you were involved in the ERP and also SSE, and now with UKA. And just to clarify, when I say innovation in this context, I'm talking sort of R&D through to the later TRL stages as well, so deployment also.
Okay.
So I have around 20 questions. We're going to start off quite broad and then sort of narrow in. Just to get your verbal consent, so this call is being recorded. Your identity will remain anonymous, and I'll just use any information for my thesis.
Okay then.
Perfect. Okay, so what do you see as the government's role in supporting clean electricity innovation?
Well, there's the standard role of governments in terms of supporting academic early stage research, and the other particular challenge that requires government intervention is that in general the costs of climate change are not properly monetized, and therefore the incentive without government intervention to innovate in that field would remain limited to very limited, and therefore it's important that government recognises that in order to meet the targets that it's setting, that it needs to provide support for that.
And do you feel that the UK's political ideology, being quite a liberal market economy, that's impacted the approach of the government in addressing climate change and driving innovation?
It definitely has over the years. I wouldn't think it was actually peculiar just to the UK. I think it's certainly true of many countries that they've struggled to. Because I think one of the problems was that at the time that this happened, we were still in relatively early stages of market liberalisation and a natural desire and movement towards disengagement of the state. And therefore, and the UK was relatively far advanced in that in comparison to other players. And so for some others who hadn't really embarked on that route as fully, it was perhaps easier for them just to maintain the role that the state used to have in setting the agenda. But in the UK, I think it was much more difficult, having set up independent regulation, for instance, and privatised so much of the industry. It had to act much more indirectly in terms of getting the appropriate industry investment in innovation.
Okay. And in between governments, have you largely seen that there's been a shared vision for where the energy system should be going?
Do I think that there is a shared vision for where it's going?
Or has there been, over the past years, as governments have changed, do you think that...
No. No, it's definitely changed significantly.
Sure. And in regards to sort of how the government has approached this, did you see that the creation of DEC made a difference around the narrative of clean energy innovation?
To an extent, it did. I think it had had pros and cons. The cynics would say that you took away all the business discipline that there had been previously in DTI and Burr and added it onto the worst bits of DEFRA. and ended up with a very ineffectual department. The positive people said it was right to link more explicitly climate change policy and energy policy, and to have the focus of the Secretary of State on that. But I don't think the department ever really fully lived up to that. It didn't, its weight as a department was always very light compared to many of the others, and tended not to be taken seriously. And a lot of the key decisions either required other departments in total or in part. So Treasury obviously remained firmly in control of the money,
right?
And that role increased throughout the latter state, throughout the coalition and Conservative government post 2010. Although I think it would be wrong to say that Labour previously would have given it free rein, because they were going through the economic problems, and there was already a strict reining in of the monies that were available.
Right.
So that made life for DEC much more difficult than it might otherwise have been. And although in some regards perhaps, I think it was more, what made more of a difference was the Climate Change Act itself, putting on a statutory basis the need to meet the targets, rather than the institutional change of DEC. And to be honest, I think one thing that I would say it had that was good was its own committee in Parliament.
Yeah.
So the EC committee, I think, meant that there was a stronger parliamentary focus on energy issues than it was the case with Burr and DTI, or subsequently with Bayes.
Okay. Yeah.
But the sort of critical problems that the department had was it was constantly on almost a war footing with BIS. It suffered from very poor coordination and interaction with either DEFRA or CLG, both of which were really important for wider climate change and energy policy.
Right.
And as I said, it never really got taken that seriously, and it perhaps suffered from having the strong, having the Secretary of State being Lib Dem, and that meant it was almost on war footing with the Treasury as well for quite a number of years.
Interesting. Okay. So, because there was the Low Carbon Innovation Coordination Group, did that not really fulfil the need to network in all of these different departments then?
No. It never had a particularly strong power base to be able to do that. It could administer things, but it didn't really have significant decision-making powers.
Okay, so it sounds like actually the wider policy mix with, you mentioned the Climate Change Act, probably was more effective in pushing the agenda forward.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And strangely, the agenda has received a further boost from the Dieselgate and the drive for better air quality rather than necessarily for low carbon per se.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Okay. I mean, some people have also mentioned the carbon price floor. Did you see that had an impact as well?
Yes, it certainly achieved what could have been achieved much more quickly and much more cheaply with with other means in terms of coal to gas fuel switching.
Right.